Imagine a world where a single gold nugget held more power than an entire army. A world where empires rose and fell not by the strength of their weapons, but by the gleam of a metal that cannot be eaten, cannot be drunk, and serves no essential purpose for human survival. Yet this metal ruled everything. It determined who became king and who became slave, who commanded and who obeyed, who lived and who died. This isn't just a video about gold. It's a video about power, about how something utterly useless from a practical standpoint became the driving force behind the greatest wars, the most critical decisions, and the political structures that shaped all of human history. To understand the moment when gold transformed into the center of world power, we need to go back long before kings, long before coins, even before the first cities emerged. In the earliest human societies, gold held little importance. Grain was more valuable. Livestock was more valuable. Weapons were more valuable. Things useful for survival took absolute priority. But gold possessed something no other metal had. It was rare, it was beautiful, it shimmered in a hypnotic way, and above all, it never changed over time. Iron rusted, silver tarnished, bronze deteriorated. Gold remained intact, as of eternal. And precisely because it lacked immediate practical utility, it began to acquire symbolic value. Unlike functional metals, gold served to express something greater, something intangible: status. Whoever possessed gold was special, not necessarily stronger, not necessarily smarter, not even necessarily wealthier, but someone viewed differently. In many ancient cultures, even though gold wasn't money, it already symbolized distinction. It was offered as gifts between tribal chiefs, used in ceremonies, and over time became the physical representation of prestige. But this still wasn't power. It was merely admiration. Then gold took a giant leap in human history when it became associated with the sacred. The Egyptians believed that gold was literally the flesh of the gods. The sun shone golden, and the god Ra bore the gleam of gold in his body. Tombs, sarcophagi, ceremonial jewelry, and religious artifacts were plated with gold to symbolize direct connection with the divine. The pharaoh, considered a living god, was the only being with legitimate right to accumulate vast quantities of this metal. The more gold he possessed, the more divine his presence and the greater his authority. Gold therefore ceased to be merely beautiful and became sacred. It was used not just as a symbol of status, but as a spiritual tool to legitimize political power. Thus kings and priests began to dominate gold. And where there was gold, there were temples. And where there were temples, there was influence. The metal came to represent something few possessed: proximity to the gods. And this privilege justified political decisions, wars, and even slavery. Gold became part of myth, part of religion, part of the identity of ancient states. Still, it wasn't officially money. It was sacred, but it didn't circulate. The true revolution happened when cities grew and armies began to expand. Governments needed to feed soldiers, build walls, pay mercenaries, negotiate with neighboring peoples, and stabilize trade routes. The problem was that, until then, there existed no universal standard for exchanging value. What was worth a lot in one city might be worth little in another. Grain could spoil. Animals required care. Land wasn't easily transportable. Weapons were useful but difficult to standardize. Something compact, durable, divisible, and recognized by all was missing. It was in this context that gold revealed its true power. It was exactly everything a ruler needed. Easy to carry, impossible to counterfeit with the technology of the time, resistant to the passage of time, and accepted by virtually any people. Merchants desired it. Mercenaries demanded it. Ambassadors received it as payment. And thus, slowly, gold began to circulate as a form of payment in major transactions. And the more it circulated, the more defined who had the strength to maintain an army. Kingdoms rich in gold grew stronger. Poor kingdoms submitted. Gold began to decide borders, royal marriages, peace treaties, and even dynastic successions. And the most interesting part is that no one had created a formal rule about this. Gold simply claimed that space because it worked. It was a silent consensus spreading from Mesopotamia to Asia, from Africa to the Mediterranean. Then arose Croesus, king of Lydia, the man who transformed gold into institutionalized power. Before him, gold was already desired, but it wasn't standardized. A large nugget might contain impurities. An ingot might have different percentages of silver. Everything varied and therefore lacked trust. Croesus's genius was realizing that if the state guaranteed the purity and weight of gold, it could control not just commerce, but political power itself. Croesus created the first official coins in history, with the royal seal ensuring that each piece had an exact value. This changed everything. For the first time, people believed in gold not just because it shined, but because the government said it was trustworthy. Trust became the new foundation of the economy, and trust is power. With these standardized coins, taxes could be collected more easily. Military payments became more efficient. Distance ceased to be an obstacle to trade. And for the first time, gold began to flow in a controlled, organized, and above all, manipulable manner. Rulers discovered that by issuing coins, they were issuing power. Gold became system, infrastructure, politics. Croesus was just the beginning. When Alexander the Great launched his military campaigns, he didn't just need soldiers. He needed gold, and he knew it. In every city he conquered, Alexander plundered treasures, temples, and palaces, accumulating enough gold to pay his generals, his mercenaries, and his allies. Gold allowed him to expand his empire at unprecedented speed. And it wasn't just a material value, but because gold carried symbolism, it proved legitimacy. It showed the world that Alexander controlled not just territories, but something far deeper, the flow of wealth. Meanwhile, in other regions of the world, gold acquired new layers of meaning. In India, it was part of matrimonial culture. In China, it symbolized prosperity and longevity. In Africa, especially in the lands of the Mali Empire, gold wasn't just abundant. It was a foundation of the entire transcontinental economy. African gold supplied Arab trade, funded trade routes, and spread all the way to Europe. Mansa Musa, king of Mali, became famous not just for his wealth, but for literally causing inflation in entire cities by distributing gold during his pilgrimages. This phenomenon, gold moving economies, inflating markets, reorganizing societies, showed for the first time that it wasn't just symbol, wasn't just divinity, nor just an object of exchange. Gold was an instrument of global control. And then came the Mediterranean empires. The Romans, in particular, elevated the concept of gold-based power to a new level. They created the aureus, the Roman gold coin, ultimate symbol of stability. From the simple soldier to the most influential senator, everyone recognized the aureus as the physical representation of the empire's power. And when Rome weakened its currency, mixing metals and reducing purity, it wasn't just the economy that fell. It was trust in the state itself. The fall of Roman gold was one of the sparks that fueled the fall of the empire. From that point forward, every nation that rose with gold. Every nation that fell without it. From the Middle Ages to the Age of Exploration, from colonization to the Industrial Revolution, gold was always at the center. Wars were waged for it. Continents were invaded for it. Entire peoples were enslaved because of it. And when gold reached the Americas, the world turned upside down. Thousands of tons were extracted, transported, and accumulated by European kingdoms, financing maritime empires, standing armies, entire cities, and a new global economic system. Gold was no longer local. It was worldwide. Its power was now international, intercontinental. And this power would culminate centuries later in the gold standard, when all modern currencies came to be measured by the amount of gold a country possessed. World stability depended on the metal. Trust in government depended on the metal. The international economy depended on the metal. At this point, Gold had become something greater than any ruler, any army, any religion. It was an autonomous force, like an entity that decided the fate of peoples. A metal useless for the basic needs of life, yet indispensable to the structure of the modern world. And the most impressive part is that all of this began with a simple gleam. A gleam that, thousands of years ago, caught the attention of curious humans. A gleam that awakened fascination. That fascination became power. And that power, even today, continues to shape the world. Because the truth is simple. Gold was never just gold. It was, and still is, the purest way to convert desire into power. And as long as there is power in the world, gold will continue to be desired, disputed, and venerated.